"Let me in, I'll reward you." Her promise would change everything. Ethan walked slowly along the quiet streets of his neighborhood. The sun had just begun to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in soft shades of orange and pink. The air was cool, carrying the faint smell of blooming flowers from the nearby gardens. It was the kind of evening that made him feel calm, almost peaceful, but tonight, something felt slightly different. There was a subtle tension in the air, something he couldn't quite name, but it made him glance around more often than usual. He had just finished his shift at the small bookstore where he worked. It was a quiet job, not much excitement, but it paid the bills and allowed him to live in the modest apartment above the store. Normally, he enjoyed these evening walks. They gave him time to think, to clear his mind after a long day filled with the rustle of pages and the soft whispers of customers searching for stories. But tonight, as he walked past houses lined neatly along the street, something caught his eye. Ahead of him, near a slightly worn, pale yellow house, a woman was standing. She wasn't like the other neighbors who were already inside, cooking dinner, watching television, or playing quietly with their children. This woman was outside, just standing near the door, her figure tense but oddly inviting. She appeared to be waiting for someone, or maybe something, but her eyes were fixed on him the moment he noticed her. "Let me in," she called softly, her voice carrying over the faint hum of evening crickets. "I'll reward you." Ethan froze. His heart jumped slightly and he instinctively slowed his pace. His mind started spinning. Why was she asking him, of all people, to let her in? And what did she mean by a reward? He had never met this woman before. In fact, he didn't even know her name. Yet, something in her tone, something in the way she looked at him, made him hesitate, not out of fear, but out of curiosity and an odd sense of urgency. He stopped a few steps away from the house, uncertain what to do next. He glanced at the slightly open door and noticed that it wasn't completely locked, though the faint rustling of curtains inside suggested someone, or something, was moving. The woman didn't appear threatening. Her hands were clasped together as if she were nervous, and her expression held a mix of desperation and hope. Ethan's mind raced with questions. Should he just walk away and ignore this strange encounter? What if she was in trouble? What if she needed help? He had always considered himself a careful person, cautious even. But there was something about this moment that felt important, like it wasn't just a random encounter. It was a choice that might matter. He took a cautious step closer. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice low but steady. The woman looked up at him, her eyes wide and earnest. "Please," she said again, "I really need help. I promise it will be worth it." There was a tremble in her voice, a hint of fear, but also an undeniable sincerity. Ethan's hands tightened slightly in his pockets. He had grown up being taught to help people, to do what was right, but he had also been warned about strangers and the dangers that sometimes lurked behind simple requests. Yet something about the way she stood there, exposed and vulnerable, tugged at a part of him he rarely let surface. "What kind of reward?" he asked cautiously, trying to keep his curiosity in check. The woman hesitated for a moment, then smiled faintly, almost sadly. "Not money," she said. "Something more valuable, but I need your help first." Her answer didn't make everything clear, but it made him even more intrigued. Ethan had always been drawn to stories of courage and unexpected friendship. He had read countless novels where a single act of trust changed the course of someone's life. And now, standing here on a quiet street in the evening, he felt like he was living one of those stories. He swallowed hard. He could feel his pulse racing. The rational part of his mind screamed to walk away, to avoid getting involved in something he didn't understand. But another part, the part that always hoped for connection, for meaning beyond the ordinary, urged him to take a chance. "Okay," he said finally, his voice steady despite the nervous flutter in his chest. "I'll help, but you need to tell me what's going on." The woman's face lit up with a mixture of relief and gratitude. "Thank you," she said softly. You have no idea how much this means." She paused, looking at him with a seriousness that made Ethan realize she wasn't exaggerating. "Please, just let me in and I'll explain everything." He took a deep breath and reached for the door handle. It was slightly cool to the touch, and the door creaked softly as he pushed it open. Inside, the house smelled faintly of baked bread and something floral, but there was also an underlying tension, as if the walls themselves had witnessed struggles that weren't meant to be spoken aloud. The woman stepped aside, gesturing for him to enter. Ethan hesitated just a moment longer before walking inside, his eyes scanning the small living room. It was modest but neat, with a few framed photographs on the walls and a small bookshelf filled with well-worn books. There was a sense of warmth here, but also an unmistakable undercurrent of urgency. "Sit down," she said, leading him to a chair near the window. "I need to tell you something important, and I need you to understand me completely." Ethan nodded, his curiosity and concern mingling into a knot of anticipation. He had no idea what he was stepping into, but already he felt a connection to this woman who had appeared out of nowhere and trusted him enough to ask for help. As she began to speak, her voice soft but unwavering, Ethan listened intently. Every word seemed to pull him further into a world he had never known, a world of hidden struggles, urgent choices, and the promise that one small act of courage could change everything. By the time she finished speaking, Ethan realized that the evening would not end quietly. Something significant had begun, something that neither of them could have predicted. And standing there in a small house on a quiet street, he understood that this moment, the choice to open the door, was the start of a journey that would test courage, trust, and the true meaning of reward. Ethan looked at the woman, whose eyes shone with a mixture of hope and determination. For the first time that evening, he smiled faintly. He didn't know what lay ahead, but he knew one thing. Whatever happened next, he had already made a decision that would change both of their lives forever. Outside, the sun had disappeared completely, leaving behind a sky full of early stars. The quiet street seemed different now, more alive, charged with possibilities and the quiet thrill of an unexpected beginning. Ethan sat back slightly, listening to the soft ticking of a clock on the wall, and thought about the strange words that had started it all. "Let me in. I'll reward you." And now he understood that the reward wasn't just a promise. It was the adventure that was about to unfold. Ethan sat in the small chair near the window, still feeling the weight of the decision he had just made. The soft evening light barely reached inside the room, but the faint glow of a single lamp cast long shadows across the walls. The house felt quiet, almost too quiet, as if it were holding its breath along with him. Clara, this was the woman's name, though he only learned it moments ago, moved gracefully around the room, her movements deliberate, as though every action had a purpose he could not yet understand. "You're probably wondering why I asked you to let me in," Clara said, her voice steady but gentle. "I know it sounded strange, maybe even risky, but I promise it's not what it seemed." She paused and took a deep breath, sitting down across from him. Her hands were clasped together, and for a brief moment Ethan noticed a flicker of worry in her eyes. He nodded slowly. "I am wondering, and I have to admit I'm nervous, but I also feel like I should be here helping." Clara smiled faintly. "That's exactly why I chose you." Her words caught him off guard. "I didn't know you, of course, but when I saw you walking by, there was something in your eyes. You look like someone who cares, someone who notices things others ignore. And right now I need someone who can see, someone who can act." Ethan's curiosity grew. He leaned forward slightly, trying to understand her meaning. "See what?" he asked. "Everything," she said softly, almost whispering. "The danger, the mistakes, the people who pretend to help but really want to take advantage. I need someone who can see through all that, someone I can trust, even if I just met them." Ethan swallowed hard. Trust was not something he gave lightly. He had learned over the years that people often said one thing and meant another. But there was something about Clara's honesty, the raw openness in her eyes, that made him feel differently. He wanted to trust her, even though a part of him screamed to be careful. "Why me?" he asked again, almost to convince himself. Clara's smile faded slightly, replaced by a look of determination. "Because you were willing to stop and listen. Most people just walk by, ignoring what they don't understand. You stopped. You noticed. That's more important than you think." Ethan didn't know what to say. He had never considered that something as simple as noticing someone could matter so much. He nodded slowly, still unsure but willing to hear more. Clara took another deep breath. "I don't want to frighten you, but I have a problem, a serious one. My younger sister, Lily, she's very sick. She needs medicine, but the people I was counting on to help, they betrayed me. I don't have anyone else, and that's why I needed to reach out, even if it sounded strange. I had to trust someone who might help without thinking about what I would give in return." Ethan felt a tightness in his chest. He could see the worry etched into her face. He had never known anyone who seemed so desperate, yet so strong at the same time. He imagined a small child, ill and fragile, depending entirely on her sister for care. The thought made his resolve strengthen. "I want to help," he said firmly. "Tell me what I can do." Clara's eyes softened. Relief passed over her face, but it was mixed with another emotion, a shadow of concern. "It's not simple," she admitted. "There are people involved who don't want me to succeed. They've been watching, waiting for a mistake. If we make the wrong move, it could get worse for both of us. But with your help, maybe, just maybe, we can make it right." Ethan leaned back slightly, thinking. He wasn't naive. He knew helping her could mean risk. But he also felt something stirring inside him, a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in a long time. Something told him that stepping into this situation wasn't just about helping Clara, it was about discovering what he was truly capable of. "What do I need to do first?" he asked. Clara looked at him thoughtfully. "First, we need a plan. We can't act without knowing what we're facing. I need you to help me think clearly to make sure we don't make mistakes we can't fix." Ethan nodded again. Planning was something he was good at. He had always been methodical, careful, and precise. He realized now that these qualities might be exactly what Clara needed. For the next hour, they sat together, discussing small details, making lists, and talking through what steps might be safest. Clara explained the situation with her sister, the people who had promised help but failed, and the limited options they had. Ethan listened carefully, asking questions and offering suggestions. He was amazed at how much he understood from her words, how much sense it made once she laid it out clearly. "You're good at this," Clara said at one point, almost in disbelief. "You see things I don't. You notice the details. That might be the most important skill we have right now." Ethan felt a small surge of pride, but also realized the weight of responsibility. He wasn't just helping someone. He was becoming part of a situation that could change everything for Clara and her sister. It was overwhelming, but not in a way that made him want to back away. In fact, it made him more determined. As they spoke, Ethan began to notice small things about Clara. The way her hands trembled when she spoke of her sister, the way her eyes searched his face for understanding, the quiet strength that came through despite the fear she carried. She was different from anyone he had met. She was vulnerable, yet fearless in her determination to protect her family. Outside, the evening had deepened into night. The streetlights flickered on, casting pools of light across the pavement. The quiet hum of the neighborhood felt distant now, as if the world outside this small house had paused to allow them this moment. Ethan realized that once he stepped out of the house, the world would resume and he would have to act. But for now, he focused entirely on Clara and the task ahead. She paused for a moment, then looked at him with a mix of hope and hesitation. "I need to warn you," she said softly. "This won't be easy. There will be challenges and it will test both of us. But if we succeed, If we get through this together, it will change everything for my sister and for me, and I think it could change something in you too." Ethan felt a shiver run down his spine, not of fear but of anticipation. He could sense the truth in her words. This wasn't just about helping someone in need. This was about courage, about trust, and about discovering how far a person could go when they decided to step into the unknown. "I'm ready," he said, finally. "I'll do whatever I can to help." Clara's face softened, and she reached out to place her hand briefly on his. It was a simple gesture, but it carried a weight of gratitude, trust, and unspoken promise. Ethan felt the connection, the quiet understanding that they were now partners in something much larger than themselves. The night stretched on as they continued to plan. They spoke quietly, carefully, mapping out the steps they would need to take, considering every detail, imagining every possibility. Ethan was surprised at how natural it felt to work alongside her, to think together and solve problems as a team. He had never experienced anything like it before, this sense of shared purpose, of being part of something that truly mattered. As the clock ticked past midnight, Clara finally leaned back in her chair, a tired but satisfied expression on her face. "Thank you," she said simply. "I know this is a lot to ask and I know it's sudden, but having you here, it gives me hope. It gives me a chance." Ethan nodded, feeling a quiet determination settle within him. He knew that the real challenges were still ahead, that the path they had to take would not be easy. But he also knew that he had made the right choice in staying, in listening, in trusting this woman who had appeared so unexpectedly on his quiet street. He glanced around the small living room, taking in the photographs, the books, and the faint smell of flowers lingering in the air. This house, this moment, was the beginning of something new, a journey that would test courage, trust, and the strength of human connection. And for the first time in a long while, Ethan felt the stirrings of hope, the quiet excitement of stepping into the unknown with someone who needed him, and someone he could rely on. Outside, the world was quiet, but inside, a plan had begun to take shape, and with it, a promise of change, of courage, and of a bond that neither Ethan nor Clara could have anticipated. And as they sat together in the soft glow of the lamp, Ethan realized that sometimes, the bravest thing a person can do is simply to listen, to trust, and to open the door. Ethan woke the next morning feeling a strange mix of nervousness and determination. The events of the previous evening replayed in his mind. The way Clara had asked for help, the urgency in her voice, and the promise of a reward that wasn't material but something far more meaningful. He had gone to bed with questions swirling in his mind, but also with a feeling that today would be the day everything truly began. The morning sunlight filtered softly through the small curtains of the living room. Clara was already up, moving about with a quiet focus that suggested she had been planning for hours. Her movements were careful but deliberate, each action purposeful. Ethan noticed small details he hadn't before. The way her hands trembled slightly when she moved quickly, the tension in her shoulders when she carried a small bag across the room. It was clear she had been through a lot, yet there was an undeniable strength in her. "I've made a list," she said without looking up, her voice calm but precise. She placed a folded sheet of paper on the table in front of him. "These are the steps we need to take today. Some are simple, some less so, but each one is important if we want to make progress." Ethan unfolded the paper and scanned it. There were notes, reminders, and small sketches of locations, all written in Clara's neat handwriting. He realized that she had thought through the situation carefully, anticipating obstacles and planning around them. It impressed him. "This is thorough," he said. "You've really prepared." Clara smiled faintly. I don't have time to make mistakes. Every choice counts, and if we get something wrong, it could make everything harder for my sister. That's why I need you, Ethan. I need someone who can think clearly under pressure, who can help me see what I might miss." Ethan nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. He wasn't just helping a stranger anymore. He was now part of a plan that could determine the well-being of a child and the safety of the people involved. It was overwhelming, but in a way that gave him purpose he hadn't felt before. "Okay," he said finally. "Let's start." Their first task was to gather information. Clara explained that her sister, Lily, needed a particular medicine that was not easily available locally. Ethan listened carefully as she described the challenges she had faced: unreliable suppliers, delays, and people who had promised help but vanished when needed most. It was clear that time was critical, and every decision they made would need to be precise. Ethan accompanied Clara to the small pharmacy where she hoped to find the medicine. On the way, she explained more about her sister's condition, the treatment she needed, and the struggles she had endured over the past few weeks. Ethan felt a pang of empathy as he imagined a young child depending entirely on someone else for survival. It strengthened his resolve. At the pharmacy, they encountered their first challenge. The medicine was in limited supply, and the pharmacist seemed hesitant to provide it without verification of a prescription. Clara remained calm, explaining the urgency of the situation and showing documents she had prepared. Ethan watched her carefully, noting how she handled stress with patience and persistence. She was both vulnerable and strong, a combination that inspired him. After a tense few minutes, the pharmacist agreed to provide the medicine, impressed by Clara's preparation and sincerity. Ethan felt a wave of relief, but he knew this was only the beginning. The real challenge lay ahead: delivering the medicine safely to Lily and ensuring that the people who had threatened Clara's plans did not interfere. As they left the pharmacy, Clara paused and looked at Ethan. "Thank you for being here," she said softly. "I don't know if I could do this alone. I've had to rely on strangers before and it hasn't always ended well. But you're different. You really listen. You really care." Ethan felt a warmth spread through him at her words. He had never considered that his willingness to help could have such an impact on someone else's life. "I'm glad I can help," he said. "We'll get through this together." The next part of their plan involved a more delicate task: avoiding people who might want to interfere. Clara explained that there were individuals who had watched her family for weeks, people who might try to take advantage of her sister's illness. Ethan realized that the situation was more complicated than he had first understood. This wasn't just about delivering medicine. It was about strategy, caution, and careful observation. They moved through the streets cautiously, choosing routes that were less crowded and keeping an eye out for anyone who seemed out of place. Ethan noticed that Clara's eyes were constantly scanning, alert and focused. She was aware of every detail, every movement, every shadow. Her vigilance was intense, but not paranoid. She had learned to navigate a world where trust was rare and mistakes could be costly. At one point, a man standing near a corner caught Ethan's attention. He was watching them closely, though he tried to appear casual. Ethan tensed, recognizing the subtle signs of someone who might pose a threat. He motioned to Clara, who nodded slightly, understanding without words. They altered their path, taking a longer route to avoid being followed. "This is why I needed you," Clara said quietly as they walked. "I can't always see everything, and one wrong step could ruin everything. Having someone who notices the small things, it makes a difference." Ethan felt a sense of pride, but also a renewed awareness of the stakes. This wasn't just about helping someone. It was about being alert, making careful choices, and protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. When they finally arrived at Clara's sister's home, Ethan was struck by the quiet stillness inside. Lily was asleep in her bed, looking smaller and more fragile than he had imagined. The sight tugged at his heart, and he felt a surge of determination to do whatever was necessary to help. Clara moved gently, checking on her sister and preparing the medicine with meticulous care. "Everything will be okay," she whispered to Lily, her voice soft but filled with conviction. Ethan could see the love and determination in her eyes. It was clear that nothing would stop her from protecting her sister. Once the medicine was administered, they sat quietly for a moment, catching their breath. Ethan realized how exhausting it had been, not just physically but emotionally. The tension of the past hours, the careful planning, and the constant awareness of potential threats had taken a toll, but there was also a sense of relief and accomplishment. Clara turned to him with a small smile. "We did it," she said. "For now, at least. This is only the beginning, but it's an important first step. Thank you for being brave enough to trust me and for helping when it mattered." Ethan nodded, feeling a deep sense of connection. He had stepped into an unknown situation, unsure of what to expect, and he had discovered courage and purpose he hadn't known he possessed. Helping Clara and her sister wasn't just an act of kindness, it was a chance to make a real difference in someone's life. As they prepared to leave, Clara gave him a small envelope. "This is for you," she said. "Not money, not a reward you can see, but something to remind you of what we've started together. When the time comes, you'll understand why it's important." Ethan accepted it, feeling a mix of curiosity and gratitude. He didn't know what was inside, but he trusted that it was meaningful. He realized that the real reward was not something tangible. It was the experience itself, the chance to be part of something larger than himself, and the bond he was forming with Clara. Walking back through the quiet streets, Ethan felt a new sense of purpose. The challenges were far from over, but he had learned something important. Courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the choice to act despite it. Trust wasn't blind, it was deliberate, built on understanding and observation. And sometimes, the simplest acts, like stopping to help someone in need, could change lives in ways he had never imagined. As night fell and the stars began to twinkle above, Ethan and Clara returned to the small yellow house where their journey had begun. The events of the day had bonded them in ways words could not fully express. There was still danger ahead, still uncertainty, but there was also hope, resilience, and the quiet power of trust. Sitting together in the soft glow of the lamp, Ethan reflected on the words that had started it all. "Let me in. I'll reward you." He now understood that the reward was not something to be measured in gold or possessions, but in courage, friendship, and the knowledge that sometimes helping another person could change everything for them and for himself. And in that quiet moment, with the world outside hushed and still, Ethan realized that his life had already begun to change, that the choices he had made had set him on a path he could never have predicted, and that the adventure ahead, though uncertain, was one worth taking. Next morning, Ethan woke with a sense of determination. He could feel that today would be another important day in this journey he had unknowingly stepped into. The events of the previous day, the careful planning, the cautious navigation through threats, and the quiet triumph of helping Lily were still fresh in his mind. But he also knew that the challenges were far from over. Clara's situation was complex, and the people watching her family were not idle. Clara was already moving quietly around the small kitchen when Ethan entered. The soft sunlight filtering through the window highlighted her focused expression. She was preparing a simple breakfast, but her mind was clearly elsewhere. Ethan noticed how alert she was, how she moved with careful purpose, never letting her guard down even in the privacy of her own home. "Good morning," Ethan said softly, trying not to startle her. Clara glanced up and smiled faintly. "Morning," she replied. "We have a lot to do today. There are more steps we need to take, and some of them are risky, but I think we're ready. Yesterday was just the first part." Ethan nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders once again. He had already seen how careful planning could make a difference, and he knew that every action today would be crucial. "What's next?" he asked. Clara set down the plate of breakfast she had prepared and unfolded another sheet of paper, similar to the one they had used yesterday. "We need to secure a few things before we can feel safe," she explained. "Supplies, information, and a plan to make sure no one can interfere. This is about being prepared for anything that might happen." As they ate quickly, they discussed each step in detail. Ethan was impressed by Clara's thoroughness. Every possible scenario had been considered, every potential problem anticipated. It was clear that she had learned to survive in a world where mistakes could be costly, and she was teaching him to see things the same way. Once breakfast was finished, they set out. The first task was to visit a small warehouse on the outskirts of the town. Clara explained that some of the supplies they needed were stored there, including medical equipment, extra food, and basic necessities for Lily. But it wasn't just about collecting supplies. It was also about understanding the people who might be watching, about noticing details that could indicate a threat. Ethan followed Clara closely, observing her as she led the way. Her eyes scanned every alley, every corner, every shadow. She was alert but not anxious, careful but not fearful. He realized that this was more than just strategy, it was a way of life for her. She had learned to move through the world with awareness and purpose, and he was beginning to see how important that was. At the warehouse, they met a man who was responsible for distributing the supplies. He was wary at first, but Clara's calm and confident explanation quickly put him at ease. Ethan noticed the subtle ways she communicated, her tone, her gestures, her attention to small details. It was clear she had done this before, and she knew how to gain trust without raising suspicion. After collecting the supplies, they took a moment to review everything. Ethan helped organize the items, making sure nothing was forgotten, and that everything was easy to access if needed quickly. Clara observed silently, occasionally offering suggestions, and Ethan felt a growing respect for her skill and determination. "This is good," Clara said finally, her eyes meeting his. "We're ready for the next step, which is a little more complicated. We need to make sure no one can follow us when we return home. There are people who might be watching, and we can't take any chances." Ethan nodded. He had already noticed subtle signs yesterday, someone watching from a distance, a feeling of being observed. Now he understood the seriousness of the situation. It wasn't just about helping, it was about protecting, about staying one step ahead of potential threats. They chose a route through side streets and quiet alleys, moving slowly and carefully. Ethan observed everything: the people on the sidewalks, the cars parked along the streets, even the shadows that seemed to linger longer than they should. Clara moved with a quiet confidence, leading the way while keeping a constant watch for anything unusual. At one point, Ethan noticed a man standing near the corner of an alley. He was tall, with a long coat and a hat that obscured part of his face. Something about the way he stood, the way he seemed to watch them without moving, set Ethan's nerves on edge. He nudged Clara slightly and she glanced in the direction of the man. "I see him," she whispered. "Stay calm. He's probably just curious, but we can't ignore it. We'll take a slightly longer route and avoid that street." Ethan followed her lead, trusting her instincts. They moved carefully, adjusting their path as they went, and soon they had left the man behind. Ethan felt a sense of relief, but also a growing awareness of the dangers that surrounded Clara. She wasn't just facing ordinary challenges. She was navigating a world where trust was rare and vigilance was essential. Back at Clara's house, they began the process of organizing the supplies and preparing for the next stage of their plan. Ethan helped with everything, from labeling items to checking that the medical supplies were stored safely. Clara worked alongside him, guiding him and teaching him as they went. He realized that this experience was teaching him more than just practical skills. It was teaching him patience, awareness, and the importance of careful planning. As the day progressed, they discussed potential scenarios and how they might respond. Clara outlined strategies for dealing with interference, for protecting Lily, and for staying safe themselves. Ethan listened carefully, offering suggestions when appropriate, and he felt a growing sense of confidence in their plan. "This is more than just helping my sister," Clara said at one point, her voice thoughtful. "It's about making sure we don't let fear control us. It's about being prepared, being aware, and acting with courage. And you, Ethan, you're learning that too." Ethan smiled faintly. "I hope so," he said. "I never thought I'd be part of something like this, but I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." The afternoon passed with careful preparation and quiet determination. Ethan noticed how Clara's presence seemed to fill the room with a sense of purpose. She was strong, capable, and deeply compassionate, yet she carried the weight of responsibility with quiet grace. Ethan felt inspired by her, and he realized that the bond they were forming was built not just on shared goals, but on mutual respect and trust. As evening approached, they took a short break and sat quietly, reflecting on the day. The challenges were far from over, but they had made significant progress. The supplies were secured, the plans were in place, and they had successfully navigated potential threats. Ethan felt a sense of accomplishment, but he also understood that this was only the beginning. Clara turned to him, her expression serious but calm. "Tomorrow will be even more challenging," she said. "We'll need to move carefully, and we'll face situations that test both our courage and our judgment. But I have faith that we can do it, and I have faith in you." Ethan felt a surge of determination. He had seen the strength and resilience in Clara, and he knew that together they could face whatever came next. He realized that courage wasn't just about facing danger. It was about staying calm, thinking clearly, and trusting in yourself and others. That night, as they prepared for bed, Ethan reflected on the day's events. He thought about the lessons he had learned, the importance of vigilance, the value of careful planning, and the power of trust. He understood that this journey was about more than just helping someone in need. It was about discovering the strength within himself, and about forming a bond that could withstand any challenge. Outside, the night was quiet, but inside the small yellow house, a plan had taken shape, and a sense of purpose had been established. Ethan knew that tomorrow would bring new tests, but he also knew that he was ready. Together, he and Clara were stronger than they could be alone, and he felt a growing confidence that they could face whatever challenges lay ahead. As he drifted off to sleep, Ethan thought again of the words that had started it all. "Let me in. I'll reward you." He now understood that the reward wasn't something tangible. It was courage, trust, and the knowledge that sometimes helping someone in need could change lives in ways he had never imagined. And as the night deepened, Ethan felt a quiet excitement for the days to come, knowing that the adventure was far from over, and that each step forward would bring them closer to the outcome they both hoped for. The next morning, Ethan woke with a mix of anticipation and nervousness. He knew that today could change everything for Clara, for her sister Lily, and for himself. The previous days had been filled with careful planning, quiet courage, and small victories. But today felt different. It was the day when all their efforts would be tested. Clara was already awake, moving through the small kitchen with a quiet focus. Ethan noticed the calm determination in her every movement, yet there was a hint of worry in her eyes. He realized that she had carried so much responsibility on her shoulders for so long that even moments of success came with tension. "Good morning," Ethan said softly, offering a smile. Clara looked up and returned the smile, faint but genuine. "Good morning," she said. "Today is the day we take the final steps. Everything we've done so far was practice, preparation. Now we have to act carefully but decisively. Are you ready?" Ethan nodded firmly. "I'm ready. Whatever we need to do, we'll do it together." They spent the morning going over their plan one final time. Clara reminded Ethan of the small details they had practiced, the routes they would take, the signals to watch for, the precautions to avoid anyone who might be watching. Ethan absorbed everything carefully, remembering the lessons of vigilance and patience that Clara had taught him over the past days. Once they were ready, they left the house, moving quietly through the familiar streets. The sun was rising, casting a soft golden glow over the town. It was beautiful, but Ethan couldn't help noticing the subtle tension in every shadow, the quiet watchfulness in their surroundings. They had learned to be aware of every detail, and now that awareness was essential. Their first task was to ensure that no one could interfere with their plan. Clara led Ethan to a small park nearby, where she explained that certain individuals had been following her family for weeks. They needed to make sure that these people would not cause harm. Ethan watched carefully as Clara studied the area, noting the movement of people, the positions of parked cars, and even the sound of footsteps. "There," Clara whispered, pointing to a figure near the edge of the park. A man stood watching, seemingly casual, but Ethan recognized the subtle tension in his stance. He had learned to read such signs from Clara, and he knew this was someone who could pose a threat. Clara and Ethan adjusted their route, moving quietly and deliberately to avoid being seen. Ethan felt his heart race, but he also felt a growing sense of confidence. He realized that he had learned to trust Clara, and more importantly, he had learned to trust himself. He could notice things he hadn't before, make decisions calmly, and act when necessary. Finally, they arrived at Clara's sister's home. Lily was awake, her small face pale but alert. She smiled faintly when she saw her sister and Ethan. Clara moved quickly to check on her, making sure she had everything she needed. Ethan helped as best he could, organizing the supplies and ensuring that everything was ready for the next stage of their plan. "Today, we need to move carefully," Clara said softly, looking at Ethan. "We have to make sure that Lily is safe and that nothing can go wrong, but I know we can do it," Ethan nodded. "We'll do it together, I'm with you." The morning passed with careful preparation. Clara and Ethan reviewed every step, ensuring that all details were covered. They double-checked the supplies, planned their movements, and even practiced small signals in case they needed to communicate quickly. Ethan realized how much he had grown over the past days, not just in skill, but in courage, patience, and understanding. As the afternoon approached, they set out to deliver the supplies and ensure that Lily's environment was safe. They moved through the streets cautiously, aware of every detail. The tension was palpable, but so was the determination. Ethan felt a strange mix of fear and excitement, a sign that he was truly engaged in something meaningful. At one point, a car moved slowly near them, and Ethan's instincts, sharpened by Clara's guidance, told him to be cautious. Clara noticed it too and led them down a different path, avoiding the vehicle entirely. Ethan felt a sense of pride. He had learned to act quickly, to trust his instincts, and to work alongside someone who had become a partner in every sense. Finally, they arrived at a small, secure location where Lily could receive additional care. Clara spoke to the caregivers there, explaining everything they had done and ensuring that Lily would be safe. Ethan watched her closely, noticing the strength and calm in her voice, the careful attention to detail, and the quiet but unwavering determination to protect her sister. Once everything was settled, Clara turned to Ethan with a faint smile. "We did it," she said softly. "We made sure Lily is safe and we avoided any trouble. Today was challenging, but we succeeded." Ethan felt a wave of relief wash over him. He looked at Lily, who smiled faintly, and then at Clara, whose eyes shone with quiet pride. The journey they had taken together over the past days had been difficult, but it had also been transformative. He realized that the reward Clara had promised was not something he could hold. It was the experience, the courage, and the bond they had formed. Clara reached into her pocket and handed Ethan the small envelope she had given him earlier. "It's time," she said. "Open it." Ethan took the envelope carefully and opened it. Inside was a simple note, written in Clara's neat handwriting. "The reward is not gold or riches." The reward is the courage you discovered, the trust you earned, and the difference you made in someone's life. Never forget that small acts of courage can change everything. Ethan felt a warmth spread through him. He realized that the journey had changed him more than he had expected. He had faced uncertainty, fear, and responsibility, and he had learned that trust and courage were the true rewards in life. Clara smiled at him, her eyes reflecting both relief and gratitude. "You've helped more than you know," she said softly. "Not just for Lily, but for me too. I couldn't have done this alone." Ethan shook his head, feeling a deep sense of humility and satisfaction. "You've taught me a lot," he said. "About courage, about trust, and about how much a single act can mean to someone else." The sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the quiet neighborhood. Ethan, Clara, and Lily sat together for a few moments, enjoying the calm after the storm. The tension of the past days had lifted, replaced by a sense of peace and accomplishment. Ethan thought about how a single moment, the moment he had stopped to listen to Clara's urgent plea, had changed everything. He had taken a chance, and in doing so he had discovered a part of himself he hadn't known before. He had learned to trust, to act, and to care deeply for someone else's well-being. Clara looked at him, her expression soft but firm. "Remember this," she said. "Life will always have challenges, and there will always be people who need help. Courage and trust are what make a difference. Never forget that." Ethan nodded, feeling the truth in her words. He knew that he would carry this experience with him forever, not just as a memory, but as a guiding principle for the rest of his life. As night fell, Ethan walked home, reflecting on the journey he had shared with Clara and Lily. He thought about the lessons he had learned, the courage he had discovered, and the trust he had earned. And he realized that the greatest reward of all was not something that could be measured or touched. It was the knowledge that he had made a real difference in someone's life, and that in doing so, he had changed his own life as well. The quiet streets, once ordinary, now felt alive with possibility. Ethan understood that sometimes, the smallest decisions, like stopping to listen, opening a door, and offering help, could set off a chain of events that transformed lives. And he smiled, knowing that he had been part of something truly meaningful, a journey of courage, trust, and hope that would stay with him forever. The stars twinkled softly above as Ethan walked, feeling a sense of peace and fulfillment. He knew the adventure had ended, but its lessons would remain with him always. And he understood at last the true meaning of Clara's words, "Let me in, I'll reward you." The reward had come, not in gold or material things, but in courage, trust, connection, and the knowledge that sometimes the bravest choice is simply to help someone in need. Ethan smiled as he reached his home, ready to face the future with the lessons he had learned, the courage he had discovered, and the understanding that one small act of kindness could indeed change everything.